Are you ready? Ready to bring a revolution to your relationships? Ready for the experiences on your dating adventure to evolve? Ready for more passion, intimacy, connection, and love in your relationship? Ready to heal past relationship wounds? You're in the right place. I'm Alan, the love engineer, and this is the Relationship Revolutions podcast. In this series, you'll get guidance and tips from me, interviews from other relationship experts, insights from couples who already have a great relationship, and other mind-opening conversations. G'day and welcome to the latest episode of Relationship Revolutions. And this week I am joined by Alison Blackler. So first two questions I have for you is how are you and where are you?
Oh, how am I? I'm good. I'm good. The sun's shining, so I'm good. And I am in Merseyside, so I'm on the Wirral in Merseyside.
Excellent. So am I correct in thinking that what you're doing now in business was a decision that you decided to have this career path as soon as you left school and went straight into it? Is that right? Or was it a bit of a life journey to come to where we're at today?
Definitely a life journey. Definitely a interesting, sometimes intentional, and sometimes it happened almost by default. But I think it's important sometimes to be okay with that, because I think some people do get very worried about where they're going, what they're doing. Are they doing it right? Are they doing it wrong? So for me, it was absolutely a journey, and one of which, I think it's important to talk about.
Excellent. So let's dig into that journey then.
Let's do it.
But before we do, would you like to share with the listeners a little bit about what it is that you actually do in this life?
So I'm a therapist and coach by trade. I've done both disciplines, and along with other things. So I'm really interested in how we think, why we think like we do, why we do what we do, our relationships with ourselves, our relationships with each other. And for me, being able to understand a bit more about that was part of my journey to get me where I am today. And that is what I like to share. So whether that could be with individuals, it could be on podcasts like this. I've got my own podcast, and I also go in and work with groups and teams, and I work with a lot of leaders, because if we understand a bit more about ourselves, we can make the changes that we want. And I think that's the glue that I've worked out, and that's what I like to share.
Yeah, because ultimately we take ourselves with us wherever we go, whether it's a business relationship, an intimate relationship, or, as you've already mentioned, the most important one, the relationship with ourselves.
It's all so interlinked. If you've got a problem with a colleague at work, some of those changes will be within yourself. I do a lot of relationship work, hence the reason why I'm on this call with you. Most challenges come from the relationship you're having with yourself, and then how you're showing up inside that relationship. And it can lead into friendship groups everywhere. We are complex as humans, and the relationships that we all have are, again, what are complex.
Absolutely. So how did that journey to being a therapist and coach come about?
So when I was younger, when you're very young, you don't know what you know now, do you? I didn't realise that I wasn't very confident, because I think as a little kid, you don't really know what that even means. You're just doing you. And I was always very chatty as a child, as well as I am now. But I think when I look back, I was actually chatty because I didn't really feel very confident. Whereas now, obviously, I've kind of aligned those two things. So I can be chatty, but I feel much better in my own skin. But through my childhood, I did feel a bit out of line with myself. I didn't feel like I was being given the encouragement in the areas that I thought I could shine in. It was a bit of, this is what you should be doing. This is what is the right thing for you. And actually, it absolutely wasn't. So fast track to about my 20s, bearing in mind, when I was 20, there was no internet. There was no social media. There was nothing. I decided that I wanted to learn a bit more about myself. So I started reading books in the library. I started to try to get to peace of myself. And that ended up leading me to go and train. Well, I didn't even know I was going to be training to be a counsellor, but I signed up to a counselling course, basically. And it was to understand myself. It was to understand the patterns that were within me and to make sense of it all. Because I sort of had this feeling that how I'd been brought up was not how I wanted it to be. So I was really determined to break the patterns that I could see that were there. And I'm saying that with respect of the people that brought me up, but it definitely wasn't working for me. So once I got to counselling college, all of the things that I'd struggled with and I'd been pushed to do suddenly all made so much sense, because suddenly, A, I could understand myself, and B, people are what I love. People are who I can engage with and I can help people. So that's where it started. And then I became, I think, a bit of a junkie, really, because I ended up doing CBT. I did different types of counselling. I trained in CBT. I've done 2 different types of coaching and NLP and hypnosis. So I ended up sort of over a 10-year period of just training in all these different disciplines, because I love understanding myself. I've studied the neuroscience. I've studied all sorts of different things. And so each one sort of led me to the next depth, if you like. So I started off doing intermediate counselling, then CBT, then so I sort of got deeper and deeper and deeper into our psyche and into my understanding of self. And I suppose running parallel with that was what was happening for me. Because if you've done any of those kind of courses, you'll know that you're learning on yourself. You're learning with your stuff. You don't do role play at counselling college. You talk about you with your peers and they practice, and then vice versa. So I think that suddenly started to see the difference, because I could suddenly see what my patterns were, where it came from, why my beliefs were like they were. And then I just became even more fascinated in that topic. So I created a business as well. I mean, there's a bit more of a story which we might talk about in a minute, but that's basically what happened.
Excellent. So what would you say was the most powerful thing for you to learn about yourself?
I think I learned that, and it's so common, that what I'm going to say, I think practically everybody does. So it is a trait that we have within humans. And it sounds crazy when you say, I realised that I wasn't being me. And I know it sounds mental, because what else can we be? But we don't. We are desperately, because of our innate need to be liked as humans, we do things for others that aren't right for us. We guess, we make assumptions, we people please. I was definitely a people pleaser. We are putting ourselves in situations that are completely wrong for us, because we want the other person to be okay with us. We don't like conflict generally. So we spend all this time basically trying to fit in. So we've got society, then we've got the people that are around us. So we think we need to fit in with them. Relationships, I was trying to fit in with who I was with at the time. And it was a disaster, an absolute disaster. And I think realising that is the disaster that I was living, and thinking, well, actually, I'll just be me. But the challenge there is that's not easy. And I hear a lot of people talk about just be you. Why not? It's really hard because of all the way that we're wired. And I love to help us all understand how you can actually do that.
Yeah, for me, I also hear the just be yourself, just be you, and all this, that, and the other as well. And for me, I think it's actually a 3-step to it. The first one is you got to know yourself. How can you be yourself if you don't know yourself?
Exactly.
The second one is being yourself, and the third one is staying true to yourself. but it all comes back to me knowing me or you knowing you. And one of the things I looked into as part of my journey in overcoming divorce and whatnot was looking at myself in the mirror and saying, right, who the hell are you? And the first answer you say, oh, I'm Alan. Okay, great. Who the hell is Alan? Oh, I'm my career, or I'm my job, or I'm my kid's dad. I'm all these different things that are part of who I am, but they're not actually my identity.
Yeah.
And you keep on digging down, and at the end of the day, I am a spiritual being living in this body, having human experiences. Yeah. That's about as close as I can get.
But I think it evolves as well, doesn't it? You know, I think people worry. The amount of people I've seen over the years, bearing in mind I worked in the NHS for 24 years as a therapist, the amount of people who came to me and said, I don't know who I am. I'm very miserable because I don't know who I am. And they sort of feel like they've got to quickly find that person. And I think there's a lot of, I quite like to talk about the noise that's out there that's implying that just be you, find yourself, and off you go. Well, you know what? It's not a one thing. It's just a continual journey of, the old sort of metaphor of thinking of it as like an onion. You know, it's just layers and layers and layers and layers, and every day. I mean, as trained as my brain is, you know, every day I'm finding out a bit more about myself. I'm becoming more of myself every day. And I think that's where we go wrong. We start to think that I need to be this thing now, you know, and I'm not happy if I'm not that thing now. And actually, that's not really the goal. The goal is to today. What are you going to do today that's the right thing for you? And then keep what's the next day and what's the next day and what. And then in that, you might have some bigger challenges that you're going to try and achieve. But in the rest, it's just what's the decisions that I'm going to make for me that are right for me today. And I think the thing that a lot of people and some of the listeners might be thinking now is that sounds selfish. That's what people are worried about. We're worried about coming across as selfish or arrogant if I'm just putting myself first. And we've got to get a sort of comfortable with that idea of, yes, you're not going to change your personality and suddenly start demanding and not doing things for other people. Of course, we're all going to still do things for other people. But it's if what you are doing is not serving you, that's the time to go, well, what is it that's missing? And that's what I think is really interesting and gets interesting if people start to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that old aeroplane analogy when they do the safety demonstration at the beginning of every single flight. Stick your own oxygen mask on before you try and help other people.
It's absolutely, it couldn't be more true. Even children, they say, you know, and it couldn't be more true. And I think if people are parents, they put them, of course they're going to put their children first, but actually that's not sustainable if you're never putting yourself at the top of your pile. And I think that's where I, like to help people kind of get rid of that feeling that they can't do these things.
Yeah, something I see on a lot of dating profiles and hear from a lot of new clients and prospective clients after they've had a long-term relationship or marriage that falls apart and they've got kids. It's things like, my kids come first and they always will, or I'm just going to focus on the kids. And yeah, I tried that. It wasn't very successful.
Yeah, but it can't be because, and also I think the caveat that I'll always put on that with people when people do say that, and on one level, yes, you are responsible for your children. But if you don't show your children how it's okay for them, for mum, dad, to have things that are for them, and if that's shutting the bathroom door and having a bath all on your own without the children mithering, if you're showing your children that you are important and that it's okay to have time or go and do your activity or your sport or whatever it is, whatever we're talking about here, buying yourself some flowers. If you don't show your children how to do that, how are they going to know how to do that?
Yeah.
And when you say that to a parent, they suddenly go, oh, okay, then I might put this a bit higher up on my list, because I think suddenly then it feels different.
Yeah, I think part of the fear behind that is the fear that if I put myself first, my children will take it that I am important and they are not.
That's not true, though, is it? You're modelling how to behave as a rounded adult. And if you let your children think that that is true, then you made a mistake, because you need them to understand. They need to learn how to manage disappointment. They need to learn patience. They need to learn no sometimes. And if we don't teach them that through you putting yourself sometimes first, then how do they learn it? I've seen adults, a complete crane crash, because as children, they were never, ever told no. And then suddenly, as an adult, it's literally a car crash, because they don't understand. They're adults and everyone's expecting them to be managed as an adult. I've got one person particularly in mind. And yeah, he just literally just thought he could just do whatever he wanted to. And then he starts working and everyone's like, excuse me? And it was a shock. It was a massive shock. His mum, who adored him, didn't do him a service by never, ever, ever telling him off and ever telling him no. And he knows that now. He can see that now.
Yeah, because in a sense, children are born with a lot of narcissistic traits. Everything happens to and around me, but they have to learn that's not the case. And if they don't, when they become adults, they turn into more fully fledged narcissistic personalities.
Yeah. Little children, toddlers, the whole world evolves around them. They think they're amazing. They think they're the best. They think they can have whatever they want. And when they're little toddlers, it's cute and it's kind of okay. But as soon as they start making those connections with consequences, and that actually that's not true, because otherwise they're going to get a heck of a shock, because they're going to go to school where other children are not going to think that, because they've had it explained to them that you can't have everything now, and you can't have that, and you can't throw yourself on a tantrum in the middle of the floor anymore, because you're not 2 anymore now, you're 10. And I think that's it. It sounds harsh, but it's for me, it's, you're skilling them up for life, and we waste opportunities by not being a little bit firmer, and that sounds wrong to say firmer, but just to be fair. Just to be fair. I think you're being fair to them. And that's where I think parents find it very difficult to balance the two. And then what I usually then end up seeing is you've got burnt out parents.
Yeah. And that's very, very easily to do. And I think it's something that's going to become a lot more common.
I think burnt out people is what's out there now. Full stop. Parents or not parents. I think we're under an awful lot of pressure. And something has got to change to create something quite different. I don't know whether we can all collectively go for it. And that's where I'm always up for these kind of conversations, and whoever's listening in to think, well, if you can be part of this different thing that needs to happen, then maybe we can change it.
Yeah, because I think it's easy to look at the school system and think, well, I put my kids in school so they learn everything there. Well, firstly, the schools can't teach discipline. They're not allowed to discipline the kids anymore, other than, you might get a lunchtime detention, or if you're really naughty, a out-school detention, maybe you'll be told you can't come in. Well, if the kids aren't academic, like I wasn't, hey, I don't go in school. Bonus party.
Exactly. It doesn't really work, does it?
But schools don't teach how to, well, they might be a little bit now, but certainly when I was there's no sort of teaching on emotions or interacting with others or getting to discover yourself in any way, shape or form.
No,
a lot of these things kids need to learn at home.
Yeah, I agree.
But that doesn't happen if both parents are out working and kids are in school all day, before breakfast clubs, after school clubs, and then maybe 2 hours in the evening when both parents are stressed trying to feed them and read stories and then get them off to bed so they can actually relax for themselves, maybe.
Yeah. It's. I mean, if you are juggling both, there's no doubt it's hard.
Yeah.
But I think how you see it in your mind, your mindset on it can make it different. And if we stick to the topic we're talking about at the minute, which is making sure that, we talked about finding yourself, but part of that is to find out what lights you up, what is your downtime, is it going off solitary, or is it mixing with other people? What is it? We're all different. What is it that you need so that you can go and get yourself topped up? Because it might be different to the next person.
Yeah, one of the things I find is having these deep conversations.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's why I love to have these kind of conversations.
Because it's not the kind of conversation you have in an office at work, or when you go down to the pub with your mates or anything. Most of that's just superficial stuff and chewing the fat, for want of a better expression.
I think for men, definitely. I mean, women do tend to talk in this way a little bit more, not always, but they do tend to get a bit deeper quicker than guys do, for sure.
Yeah. I think a lot of guys look at this sort of talking about a problem. Well, that's great, but if that talking doesn't create a solution, I've wasted my time.
Yeah.
And if you know that problem doesn't have a solution, why talk about it anyway?
Yeah. But you raised an interesting point, and something that I do talk a lot about when it comes to relationships is because, we are wired differently, men and women.
Yeah.
And if you are a guy who likes to, if we're going to talk very generically here, likes to fix things, men do, like you say, if I can't fix it, I won't bother mentioning it. That's how they work. Women don't work like that. They do. They are much more emotional, and they do tend to need to talk things through. But I think some of the clashes and crises in relationships are when people aren't respecting their differences. Scenario is, guy just needs to go to work, get his head down, doesn't really think about whatever it is that's going on at home because he's doing his job. Comes home, partner says, did you think about, the problem we've got at the moment? Well, no. She then interprets that to mean that he doesn't care because she has rang her best friend and had a massive big debate and a big conversation, probably had tears and all sorts of things. And because the two aren't aligned, the conflict is there, but it doesn't need to be there, because that's just, if we men need to come sometimes and sit and talk to the women, but women need to let men go and just do their thinking on their own as well. So it's, again, I'm talking very generically because I know you've got their own unique style, but if we can work better together on how we are, then our conversations will be healthier. Because the conflict can come from just the fact that you're different, not the problem that you're talking about. That's like lost in the translation. You end up getting all het up about, well, you haven't thought about it all day. Oh, he obviously doesn't care. He's, blah, blah, blah. And all the noise that starts to spin around in people's head becomes then another problem.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the best lessons that I picked up was a little expression that is, it's not the problem, it's how she feels about the problem. She's not looking for a solution, she's just looking for a space to express whatever that emotion is, whatever's going on. And then chances are she will find her own solution anyway.
Well, we will anyway. I mean, we will anyway always find our own solutions. I mean, that's something else that's really interesting, is we often put a lot of emphasis and pressure on needing to speak to somebody so that they can actually solve the problem. And 9 times out of 10, they can't do that. And again, that can be a real pressure in a relationship. If one is feeling like the other one is expecting them to fix me, so if you did this, I would then be happy. That's very dangerous territory, because we can't guarantee that they'll do it the way that you think they want it done. That, again, I've spent a lot of time, I've written a book about relationships, and a lot of it is about how people can alleviate some of that pressure around things like this.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pressures we have in relationships is the idea that we are supposed to make our partner happy, or they're supposed to make us happy.
Yeah.
When reality is, it's got to come from inside. Yeah, they give you a reason to connect with that happiness or that joy, but they're not going to cause it unless you choose to go there.
Exactly. And it's so interesting how we don't pay attention to it when it's the happy things. So when somebody does make you happy, we don't say, oh, you did that and you made me happy. But when somebody has made you unhappy, oh, yes, we put that all on there.
Yeah.
You've made me angry. No. They might have done something that was very unsettling. But you are responsible for yourself.
Yeah, because it's how we interpret that event, whether it's a physical thing, something that was said, whatever it may be. Our interpretation of it is what creates that emotion.
Yeah. But people can get so lost in not understanding that.
Yeah.
I did for years. I blamed my parents. I blamed all sorts of people for years and years. And then when I suddenly started making sense of things, I was like, okay, I get it. I get it. And then I could take my responsibility and make a decision that was right for me. And that was my pivotal moment when I started to actually realize that I could do that. And then what was my life like? Much calmer, much happier, much better.
I think something's question just came up is I hear a lot of people saying, oh, you really need to be able to empathise with your partner. Yeah, okay, there's a lot of sense in that. So if my partner's overwhelmed with emotions all over the place, from my understanding, if I empathise with her, then I'm going to take on all of those emotions and that overwhelm, and then we've got two people that are completely overwhelmed with emotions all over the place. How does that work? How does she feel that I'm holding that space for her to express those emotions in that time? If I do that, be compassionate towards her emotions. That for me, I feel is far more powerful.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be helping someone, being able to hold a safe space for them to explore and express how they feel, but joining in, it's a bit like if somebody comes, I mean, as a therapist, if somebody comes and is crying in a session, which is very common. Yeah, I don't cry. I empathise, but I don't sit there crying because I'm not going to serve them by doing that, no matter what they're saying. I mean, I've heard some horrific stories over the years sometimes, and you do think, wow, but you're creating a space that's helpful, and joining in and being overwhelmed or being angry with them. I mean, it's a bit like if you ring your best friend up and you're moaning about, you're angry and you're moaning about your partner to them. You don't need them to say, yes, I know, and because that's just going to completely wind you up. That you need them to be compassionate, say, I hear you, but what are you going to do? Because it doesn't serve you to just wind people up. And that, again, that's what you do see people doing.
Yeah, it's that being able to look in the mirror at yourself fully. Your own actions and behaviours, like, okay, yeah, your spouse has flipped out, yeah, okay, what happened just before? Oh, well, I said this, that, or the other. And what if they'd have said that to you? Oh, well, I wouldn't have been over impressed.
Hello. It's like a dance, isn't it? Communication is like a dance. People say something, and you think, because 80% of what we say is completely unconscious anyway. We don't actually sit and think about what I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next. It's all unconscious. It's just a load of stuff that comes out of our mouths. Because of that, you say what you think is right. The other person takes it in, processes it through the most complex set of filters that you have no idea what they even look like. They then respond, and you're shocked because you think, what? I mean, if people say, oh, I didn't mean it like that, that what you've said hasn't landed. It literally, the person did not hear what you're saying. Do you know, one game I think is really funny and demonstrates this beautifully. If you've ever played a word association, So, I say grass and then you say
green.
There you go. Yeah. And then you said green to me and I say, I don't know, garage door. I mean, you just don't know. You just don't know what people are going to say next.
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, that word association game is absolutely hilarious because, you automatically might do the classic red buses and things like that. But actually, you might not. You might say something really random. And that's what I love about people is you just never really know what they're going to say or how they're going to interpret something.
Yeah.
But when we're in a relationship, yes, we've got a few more ideas about how, if you've been with somebody for a while, you can predict a little bit about what they might say, my partner, he probably won't like that. Yeah, you might be right. But you might not be either. You might be totally wrong. And I think that's where we get ourselves into a right pickle. I really do.
Yeah, so was it 7% of our communication is the words that we use?
Yeah. 33%, 38% is the tone, the pitch, the volume, the speed. So if I said, I'm having a great day, thank you, the words that you've heard are less than everything else that you've heard me say. That I don't mean that. I'm not. By the way, I'm having quite a good day, but it's just an example. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The way that we say it, the pitch, the volume, and then 58%, I think if that makes 100, is completely unconscious. And we're not even aware of some of that ourselves, of the nuances.
And with this modern world of dating, with everything being online, for the first, I don't know how long, depending on how long it takes you to actually meet or get on the phone or get on a video call, most of it is just text chat.
Yeah.
So the words we use, if they're still 7%, well, that's all you've really got to work on, unless there's a few emojis or an exclamation mark or something, or 20 of them, depending on what they're saying. Then it's all our interpretation of those words. 100%. And it's that interpretation that we respond to.
Exactly. And that's what I think makes it really interesting, but also dangerous, especially if you talk about things like dating, is you will make up how you think that person has said it. So there is your interpretation, but then there is on top of that, there is what you've made up about how they've said that word. So it can lead us into all sorts of messes because they aren't saying it. If you could hear them, they'd be saying, sure, that's fine, that's good for me. And you've read it as, sure, you said, oh, they're not really interested. If somebody said, yeah, sure, that'd be great, and you interpret that as, sure, yeah, that'd be great, then you've made up that they're not into you. Yeah. And actually, they were saying, yeah, sure, great, I look forward to it. And we just make up all these crazy things that we think people are doing.
Yeah, even with, if I'm talking to my partner, she'll say something and I go, something like that, and she'll interpret that as a yes or a no, whereas for me, a lot of the time, it's something to think about.
Exactly. I mean, you can, obviously, relationships, as you get to know each other, you can, as I said earlier, you can start to have an idea what somebody is saying, doing, etc. But it's not an exact. Because even ourselves, sometimes we can't even trust ourselves. We don't even know ourselves. Genuinely, sometimes we don't even know. We say things sometimes, particularly and that's where if somebody repeats it back to you. So if you are with a coach or somebody who's quite intuitive and they repeat back, it's like, did I say that? Oh my gosh, where did that come from? Because sometimes we say things that are just so out of, they're in there. They're in there somewhere, but they're not really connected to what we're actually doing.
Yeah, the number of times as a parent I've had either my mother or my father come out of my mouth. It's like, what is going on here?
I think that's a terrifying thought for a lot of people, isn't it? Oh my gosh, I sound like my parent. Yeah, I definitely didn't ever want to sound like my parents.
Yeah, if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Was one of the favourites.
Yes, we're definitely not allowed to say that anymore.
No, this day and age, it's if you stop crying, I will buy you something.
Yes. Or you can
Or
go
you
back
can
on
have
your
whatever you
screen.
want. Just shut up.
Well, the parenting style's so different, isn't it, these days? And when I talk to leaders, I'm going a bit off piste here, but when I talk to leaders and managers, managing someone who has been parented in the last 10 years versus somebody who was parented 20, 30, 40 years ago is a whole different gambit.
Yeah.
Massively. It could not be more different.
Yeah, and also if you're managing somebody that's, say, two people, one who their parents ran their own business and were self-employed, and the other who was an employee, the mindsets between those two are completely different as well.
You're right, yeah.
And you can flip that into the relationship space and say, well, someone who's had parents that stay together and had really good communication styles, that their offspring in a relationship is going to be very, very different to one where mum and dad stay together but they're at each other's throats all the time, or the one that's just got one parent for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, you can absolutely see, we are all a sum of what happened.
Yeah.
We are all a combination of whatever has happened to us. And you can absolutely see when you look with a really curious lens at the patterns that are playing out based on how and what you saw as a child and as a younger person, definitely. And often for me, when I do one-to-one sessions, sometimes just paying attention to that, just be like, oh, that's why I do that. No, you don't have to judge it. You don't have to do anything else with it. It's just like, oh, I see that now. I see that why I do that. So let's say, I don't know, let's see if I can think of an example. So somebody might have had very strict parents or very strict father, quite frightening, kind of get this right all the time. And then when they can start to see patterns in their life now where they find it quite hard to speak up, to share their needs, to express themselves, to put themselves above the parapet, as they can say that saying. It's they can suddenly see why they're trying to stay invisible, because it was easier and it was safer to stay invisible as a child in the family home because that's the way it was. But it doesn't serve them now. They need to be able to speak up. And it's so lovely when somebody goes, I get it now. And then it's like, okay, so what are we going to do differently? So because you don't need to do that anymore. That was the old way that kept you safe, and it made total sense then, but it doesn't serve you now. And I think that's where the gems are for people, for all of us.
Yeah, most definitely. I had one of those experiences myself, like when it came to go back to the confidence thing, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I didn't have the confidence to go and talk to a girl I liked at a bar or a disco.
Yeah.
I just could not do it. And you sort of reflect back and you think, well, I had years of training on don't talk to strangers, and little kids should be seen and not heard, and all these different things. And you think, well, okay, she's a stranger, so I shouldn't talk to her. And I still feel like I did when I was 5, so I should probably be seen and not heard. So it's like, I wonder why I didn't go say hello.
Yeah. But isn't it so much more freeing, rather than see yourself through the lens of, oh, I'm not very good, I'm not good enough to go and talk to that person, just to be able to see yourself through that kind of lens and just say, look at all the patterns that were ingrained in me, part of who I am. They're just playing out. Yeah. So what are you going to do to help move that along? It's lots of different things to be able to free yourself from those old patterns, but just you've got to be aware of the patterns first. I believe that 80% of changing anything is self-awareness.
Yeah.
is to just be aware that that's there. So for you, just to spot, rather than think that you're less than, or you're not confident, or you feel anxious and worried about talking to somebody, it's just like, okay, let me work with the patterns that are ingrained first, break those down gently, and then you can start to show up. And it's just so freeing. It's just so lovely to see people suddenly start to realise that they can actually have the life that they want, whether that is a relationship or whatever it is that they're after.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, our parents do the best they can with whatever they've got. When I sort of look, my parents that were born in the 40s and 50s, like, okay, well, their parents had been through at least the Second World War, a generation before, possibly both. I think, okay, well, I can see where the scarcity mindset comes from, because there wasn't any food, there wasn't any money, and the communities were a heck of a lot smaller back then.
Yeah. Well, we connected only with the people that we actually knew, whereas now, you know, you and I were introduced by somebody not that long ago, you know, we would never have met back in those days, because the chances of us meeting, unless we were living in the same village or town, was very slim.
Yeah, and now if you're looking for someone to date, it's like, well, I'm not just looking at the local town or the local club. I'm looking all over the world.
Yeah, exactly. Which is great and terrifying all in one breath, I think.
It is. Yeah, it's almost like, I think people dating today, it's almost like a kid in a sweet shop that's just overwhelmed with all of this choice.
But what we see, coming back to something that we talked about earlier, and a real focus for me, if I'm ever talking to anyone or working with a group, around finding the right one, if you are listening to this and you're dating, the closer you get to being true to who you are, to working out who you are and what you are, technically, this market that's like a sweetie shop should shrink, because it isn't all those people at all out there that are in this sweetie shop. That we've got to get to that point where we know what it is that's right for us. And I think that's where people who are dating do feel very overwhelmed, and they think that there's this market of thousands of people and I can't find one in the thousands of people. But actually, it isn't the thousands of people. Being able to choose. I mean, when you are on dating sites, and it's homing in on the bit. There's somebody that's going to light you up, isn't it? That you've got to be able to do, and be able to say, no, that's not right for me, and not feel that you've got to go and try and pursue something that actually, you know, is, you're not being true to yourself. So, you know, so I think I always say the more self-development you do, and if anyone is listening and is on the dating scene, the more self-development you do, your market shrinks. But that is a good thing. So your sweetie shop shrinks and sells a lot less sweeties, but that is a good thing, because then you're more likely to be able to navigate and find somebody that is actually going to make you feel content. And otherwise it's just a minefield. So I think that's the trap, I think, that we fall into, that we think, I can't find anybody. There's all these people, I can't find anybody. But your market's too broad. Shrink it. It would be my thoughts on that. But you've got to be true to you while you're doing your shrinking. You've got to have the courage to say, no, not him or not her, and keep looking. And then all of a sudden, or maybe a lot of people talk about, they pop up when you stop looking.
Yeah.
Which I'm often a fan of saying, well, maybe
it happened to me.
It happened to me as well. But maybe, you know, that pressure of desperation, try and find, just say, do you know what, I'm happy on my own, which means you've got true to yourself. And guess what? Boom, hello. There you go.
Yeah, I saw a meme on Facebook a couple of years ago, and it resonated quite powerfully with me. It says, little boy says to his dad, Dad, how do I find the one? How do I know she's the one? And the dad's response is, instead of looking for the one, become the one. become the one that she's looking for.
Yeah, exactly. Which means your Swedish shop is only going to have a couple of choices. One choice probably, but maybe a couple. We all need to have a few dates to be able to work out what we don't want. But I think this is the challenge that we've got today when people are single and looking for that relationship. Or if you're on there and you're just having fun and you just, go for it, have fun, go out with loads of people and just have fun, but not feeling like you're on that, I need to find the right one.
Yeah.
Because I don't know whether that mindset really is the right approach.
Yeah, there's the one for now, and there's the one for an evolved version of myself in a few years' time, because there's no guarantees they're both going to be the same.
Sure. Well,
there's
we
the one
evolve.
that's a great match for my ego. There's one that's a great match for my heart. But it's finding that one that's a match for all three.
Yeah. I think that means that it's a task to be had. I think it's a difficult task. Yeah.
Yes, and I also believe we get misled by all the fairy tales and the Disney movies.
Oh my
they
God.
met and they lived happily ever after. Really? They didn't have any challenges to overcome, or?
Yeah, no, I was definitely brought up with Disney fairy princesses and thought that that's what it was all about, and then life is not quite as princessy as that. So yeah.
So, one of my books, I put a chapter in there saying that there's three approaches to love, or three approaches to dating. On one side, you've got the shrinking, I think I called it, or where you shrink yourself down because you don't feel like you're good enough and nobody will ever really love me. So if I love somebody really, really powerfully, then they'll love me back. Coming from that place of not enough, a lot of anxiety and all that kind of thing. Then on the flip side of that, you've got those swelling up the Donald Trump or the Andrew Tate that puff the chest out and basically say, I'm better than everyone else, and scream out to be respected, and both of which are inauthentic. But then there's that path down the middle of sincerity, where people say, yeah, I'm not great. I'm the best version of myself that I can be right now. This is me. And it's about that truth of self and seeking somebody on the same path. So it's almost like a win-win deal rather than I don't mind losing as long as the other person wins, or I don't care if you lose, but as long as I win. That for me is the path to better quality relationships.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's got to be a balance, hasn't there, in a relationship that has times where one person can be shining and the other one is encouraging, and so there is one that's being like, hey, look what I've achieved, and the other person is able to share and enjoy that. Then it flips and it can be the other way around, where it's the other person is maybe doing something or needing some extra encouragement, and come on, you get your cheerleaders. And then there's times where you can be, in my mind, both equal, just standing next to each other. Nobody's in front being cheerleaded, and vice versa. And I think that is a healthy, I talk a lot in my book about that healthy approach to a relationship where no one is dominant of each other, no one is less than. You've got your times where you're absolutely equal, and then there's other times where, one of you is going to be maybe leading in something or got a new job or something really exciting, and the other person is cheering and being encouraging, and then next month or next year later or whatever, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
And I think finding that balance is critical to a healthy relationship, because from there, each person can be themselves and the other one will help and cheer, and then know that it'll flip. And I think that in itself is just the honey in it all, the nectar in it all.
Yeah, I had an interview with a Hollywood actress a while back. I can't remember who it was or who her famous parents were, but the interviewer asked, well, how did they stay together for so long? She says, well, I actually asked that question of my dad because I wanted to know, and the dad's answer was simply, "Well, we never wanted a divorce on the same day."
Interesting, very interesting. Bit of conflict there.
Yeah. So, from your perspective, what's the difference between a therapist and a coach?
Oh, good question. So for me, a therapist obviously is usually going to deal with a lot more trauma, a lot more past. In the disciplines that I had as a therapist, you are holding a space to allow somebody to explore their trauma, their past, their behavioural. Again, it depends what type of therapy, because obviously you've got CBT, which is very behavioural based. You've got Gestalt, which is all about the past. But basically, the difference for me, the way I've always seen it, is very much a therapist holds the space to talk about the problem and come up with the solutions. But a coach, and the way I coach, is very much, no matter what's happened to you, let's work out how does it affect you and how are you going to move forward.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel that, especially today, I'm not disrespecting anybody going for therapy, because sometimes, gosh, you need it to be able to free yourself of the way that the brain is wired. But for me, coaching gives people the opportunity to think about taking action. What are they going to do differently, and how are they going to move forward? But I use different types of coaching as well. So I use a coaching process called clean language coaching, which gives people that space to understand their metaphorical world and their metaphorical space. And I think that in itself is really, really interesting, to be able to help people be balancing the two.
Excellent. No, that definition of coaching certainly resonates with me, because it's fairly similar to how I work. If we need to dig into the past, yeah, we've got tools to do that, and that's great. But it's all about where are you at now? Where do you want to be? Okay, great. How are we going to get there?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and for all of us, we've all got a story. We've all got some stuff that's happened. We've all got a bit of trauma or something that's happened. It doesn't have to be like the most horrific stuff, but we've all got stuff. If you spend too much time digging around in there, it's all happened. Can't change it. All you can do is think about the future and how are you going to move forward. So for me, being able to focus and see it like that, I think helps people get moving, respecting whatever's gone on, but just get moving. Because otherwise, we do sit in the past, dwelling, if only this had happened, how can that possibly, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to me, this. It's just a crash. It's just a literal crash, because the brain, every time you think about the thing that's happened, the brain thinks it's happening again. So you're re-traumatized all the time, which is why I moved away from therapy and went into coaching and spent much more of my time there.
Yeah, so I think it was Tony Robbins says some of my first clients, they'd been with their therapist or counselor or whatever they were for 10, 15 years. And then they'd work with him for 3 sessions and problem solved.
Yeah, that's how I work. Yeah, I have people who've known me for a very long time, but I don't have people coming week in, week out. Coaching, leadership coaching, for example, you can, hold a space for somebody every month where they come and we talk about whatever their current challenges are, and then how are we going to move forward. But therapy, like that, for me, I think the way that we are now, I don't know that it's really serving people anymore.
Yeah. Apart from the fact,
apologies to all the therapists out there who are listening, but I just think
wait 2 or 3 years for the NHS to connect you with somebody, you've got an even bigger problem.
I know it's difficult. It is difficult. That side of it is very difficult. I left the NHS after 24 years, partly because what the NHS looked like when I joined compared to what it was 20 years later was just a complete. I love the NHS still, and I feel very strongly about it, but I just think it's broken.
Yeah, it's a great idea, but it's, as you say, it's certainly very poorly.
Yeah, it is very poorly, and the people working in it are very poorly as well.
Yeah, I think it's the issues there are higher up than the people doing the work.
Yeah, definitely.
So, for anyone who's listening to this or watching us on YouTube or Spotify or wherever they are, and they'd like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Well, I have a website, which is www.2-minds.co.uk. On there, you can then link to all of my socials. So I love to connect with people on socials. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I also have a podcast called Mental Wealth, a podcast to invest in your mind. I've done 50 episodes. I'm having a little break at the moment, but there are 50 episodes there. And some amazing guests, again, brilliant conversations, all about little top tips. You know, one of my big things is what's the one small thing that you can do differently based on what you've just heard now? Because I think, you know, it's like a jigsaw, isn't it? So many different things that people need to do, can do. And I think that's where we get overwhelmed with all the things. So for me, it's, you know, sticking to something that works for you and then make that work and then find the next thing. So yeah, so I'm kind of on all the usuals, I should say. I've got a link tree. I've got a link tree on which is Alison 2 Minds, which gives you any platform people fancy having a look at.
Awesome. So, final question, and it's one I ask everybody, but don't tell them about it until they're on.
Right.
And that question is, as this podcast is called Relationship Revolutions, from your perspective, if there was one thing that would bring a revolution or evolution to the world of dating and relationships, what would it be?
Oh gosh, there are so many answers I could give for that. I'm going to say, so dating or relationships, they feel quite different for me. But I think if we're going to focus on dating, I think people need to stick to their kind of truth. Just, you know, as soon as something feels wrong, just get out. Because I think we keep things going. You know, I mean, one of the things I talk about in my books is the love chemicals, you know, that are pumping when we first get attracted to somebody, and when we make decisions inside that period, which is about 6 to 8 weeks, they won't be the right decisions. So for me, it's sticking to your truth. But again, that sounds, we all say that, don't we? It sounds it's easier said than done.
It is, because you've got to know what that truth is.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Work out what your truth is and then stick to it. So if you've made a rule that something isn't right for you, then work out, are you going to stake to that rule, or are you going to keep breaking your own rule?
Yeah. Excellent. Well, it's been an honour and a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm sure we'll see each other again in the online space in the near future.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for listening. And if you haven't already, please leave me a review on your preferred podcast platform. Click the like button and also subscribe so that you get the new episode notifications. I'm curious, what did you take away from this episode? Please share your takeaways with me. Send me an email to relationship-revolutions@theloveengineer.rocks.